everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have an amazing podcasters on today to chat about all things podcasting. We're going to do some networking, which we all need to do as podcasters. And Anna Zugheri's on today. We're going to be talking about her podcast, So Basic, which is not really basic. It's really great. So Basic with a Little Extra is the name of her podcast. Anna Zugheri's on. Anna, welcome to the How to Podcast series. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm so excited. I feel super extra right now.
Super extra.
Yeah, I mean, on your show, I was basic like 2 minutes ago, and now I feel a little extra.
Wow.
It's such a privilege and honor. Like, I've been listening to your podcast. I've been learning from it too. And I am looking forward to this conversation because I'm excited.
Well, thank you for listening. And likewise, I'm listening to your podcast and your most recent episodes around networking. They are stellar. They're really, really good. And you really unpacked networking for us. So I would love to chat a little bit about your most recent episodes, but tell us again about the name of your podcast and a little bit of information about your show. Go ahead. Plug.
Yeah. Well, first of all, friends, I hope that, you won't be taken away from this, but I love to talk, if you haven't noticed. I love to talk. I always picture myself as Donkey, from the movie Shrek, that Shrek is like, oh my gosh, who's talking? And he's like, it's me. I love to talk. So I think that's one of the main reasons why I started the podcast, because I felt like I had a lot to say. And I'm like, somebody out there might listen to this. So that's basically how I started. I was a children's ministry leader, and I kind of paused that for a little bit. And I was like, what am I going to do now? And, during the pandemic, I started learning. I went to YouTube University and I learned all the things, podcasting and YouTube lives and streaming and all that kind of stuff, because I've always liked technology. So, and as my oldest daughter got married that year, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could be a grandma any minute. So I need to start building some legacy. What's the best way I can do this? Oh, through a podcast. I can start recording my basic stories, and, my grandchild one day will listen to them maybe. And,
Nice.
so that's basically how it started. But now how the name came to be, it's because, in the world that I've move around in the area, my daughter goes to private school, and there's a social economical sphere in that realm, right? And I've always felt that I don't fit quite well because I am so basic. You'll see me with jeans. I don't do my nails, like it's such a waste of time for me to go to the salon and spend 2 hours there. So, looking at that, and one day I came home and I was kind of frustrated, and I told my husband, I'm so basic. My daughter was talking about that, how some girls were calling themselves basics, and the extras, like the ones that, oh, look at me. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just so basic, but with a little extra. I mean, like, I like to do my hair and my makeup here and there. So that's in a nutshell how the name started. And then all these stories, I'm like, I think I have basic stories, but then, I've gave my life to the Lord a few years ago, not a few, but some years ago. And I'm like, I can see God on those stories that I didn't see before, And so my stories are so basic, and he just brings a little extra. And that's basically the podcast.
There you go. I love the story behind the name. That always, I just love that, because now I can listen with that in my mind going, this all makes sense. And your topics make sense, and all the things you speak about. Networking is your most recent episodes. Talk about the power of networking and why you love networking so much.
Yeah. So it started with the, part of a ministry. It's called the Get Together, and it's a bunch of nonprofit organizations meet with business people, and like a lot of business people don't know where to volunteer or where to give their money to, because there's so many out there. And unfortunately, there's scams also, that make themselves look as a nonprofit. So what the Get Together does is that they vet those nonprofit organizations to make the matches with those. So we get together once a month, and I've been part of the Get Together for, I don't know, like 5 years or so. And as going through these lunches and being in ministry, I was like, wait a minute, what is this network thing? How does that work? And how does that benefit me and others? And it's so interesting to learn about the collaboration, and that networking itself is a thing. Like, if you think about it in the context that I lived in, Jesus was networking with the 12 disciples, right? Like he was like, okay, I'm going to get a tax collector, because he has some connections and he knows numbers and he knows all the things. And then I'm going to get it with Peter because, he's a fisherman. He has a network right there with those people. And if you think about it, and I forgot the statistics, but I think it's about 80 people that one individual networks with, per individual, like in your lifetime. Like at this moment, I should have like 80 people in my network, like that are very close to me. And if you think about it in the perspective of podcasting, or the, whatever your job is, or whatever your business is, if you really have 80 people and they have 80 people, how big can that grow and expand? So so that's basically how I see networking. It's like a spider web, right? And you start like this, and then you keep growing and growing and adding people to your networking. But the best part of it is not that it's just what can I get out of that person or out of that connection. It's what can I give to that person as well. So it's a mutual collaboration, and I just love networking.
Nice. And another part of networking is going to conferences. And you talked before we hit record that you went to a conference recently. Yeah. You got to go for one of 3 days, which is great. You had some expectations going into the conference, but you had an interesting experience, let's put it that way, going to the conference. Can you kind of share a little bit about what you were hoping to get out of the conference and maybe what you came away with?
Yeah. So I was expecting a little bit more fresh information, if you would. And I didn't get that, but I can see how it was still good. Don't get me wrong. And the connection, but like a little insight of as far as networking, when especially podcasting, I think it could get lonely if you are not networking with other podcasters, because a lot of people try to do it themselves, because number one, let's just be honest, we're not, making tons of money, or even not even money. Let's just say it like that with podcasting. I think that podcasting is like the traveling, I don't know, connection for you to then make money, right? And you get the sponsors and things like that. There's all things that we can talk about, because I'm going to ask you about what you told me about that part of monetizing. But just the networking part, I think it's super important when you go to conferences and you connect with other people. And as a matter of fact, you and we met through a group of podcasting, and I think this was a great connection, and I wasn't really expecting that. So in the conference as well, just going in there and not maybe not getting the information I needed because I already knew what they were talking about. But it was meeting and connecting with other people that are doing podcasts, and maybe that I can help or they can help me in some kind of way.
What I like about hearing your comments around the conference is you walked in expecting one thing, you're hearing them talk about stuff that you know. I would take that as confirmation that you're on the right path. When they're on stage talking about stuff and you're thinking, yeah, this seems normal I know this information.
Yeah.
That should be like a resonating with you that, Anna, you're doing the right thing. You're doing your podcast and you're doing it well. When the experts on stage are telling people to do it the way you're doing it. So that's a good confirmation for you.
That was. And you know what? And I'm guilty of it. Like I when I got home, that's the first thing I talked to my husband about. I was like, am I being a little bit prideful because I know these things, And in podcasting, there's another thing that we could suffer from, and is the alter ego that we might show with our podcasting, right? Like, and I hit 500 listeners today, so look at me. And every time I share that I have a podcast, people go like, oh wow, let me look it up, and and you feel like, man, I'm a podcaster, right? And so it could, you have to be really careful with that. And yes, I did feel like a boost of confidence. I'm like, man, I already know this. But at the same time, when I got home and I talked with my husband, he broke me down. I call it like I'm the balloon and he's the string. I can go all the way up and he brings me back. So he's like, yeah, but there might be people out there that don't know this information. And, and I was like, yeah, you're right. So yeah, have you participated in any conferences? What are your thoughts on networking?
I love networking any way that we can do it. And this is a very intimate way to network, the two of us together doing a podcast. So this brings me a lot of joy to have time with you, first of all. For me, my big challenge being in Canada is that I have this nasty thing called a border and travel to get to these amazing events. And we don't have the amount of events that you have in the States, which makes me jealous, to be honest, as a Canadian. I would love to have access to these big events and have all this time with other great podcasters. But for me, financially, as a non-monetized podcast, not making millions of dollars like they promise, I have a job and I have a couple weeks worth of holiday time. I have family. I have responsibilities. And I struggle to find time to get to these events as much as I would love to. So I would be in the same boat as you, I think, listening to these experts talk about podcasting, and I'd be like, we're already doing the things you're saying. That's just confirmation. And I would be looking for growth on the next thing. So in replacement for now, until I can afford to go to these beautiful events, I like to connect one-on-one like this and through a podcast, because then I get a chance to talk to people who are doing the thing. You're doing it, Anna. You are a podcaster. I get to talk to you and learn from you and get your perspective, because that's going to help me shape my show. And I think if we all have that hunger and that desire to learn from each other, instead of saying that, Anna, I'm the expert here and I know everything, so listen to me. No, I come to you and I'm like, Anna, teach me how you do what you do, because you're going to say something that changes my thoughts, changes my perspective, and gives me new insight that can help me. So I'm here to learn from you. And that's why I'm doing the co-hosted thing, is because you bring value to this conversation. And I can't wait to learn from you and how you do your podcast. So your husband's going to be the string that brings you down in your balloon. I'm going to be the one that pushes your balloon right back up again. That's my job. So between your husband and I, we're a good balance for you and your family. Yeah, we'll do that. So I'm here to inflate your balloon more and and, bring more people to your podcast. So,
Thank you.
so you have listened to some of my episodes, and that makes my heart happy. So is there anything listening to the shows and you're thinking, maybe that's some new information or something I needed to hear again? Was there anything that kind of stood out in your memory?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely trying to catch up because, I'm a
Yeah.
new listener of yours, and I've listened to the last 3 ones.
Nice.
And but I think what's her name? And I'm terrible with names.
Oh, it's okay.
But she gave good insights, and actually you were also, I think you were talking about monetizing,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the
Yep.
how to the ways that are out there to monetize. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I
Different
can't
ways. Yeah.
remember her
It's
names.
Tiffany.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I learned a few tips from her, and I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't thought of that. And actually, that was the one breakout that I was like, okay, listen, Dave just gave me this information on his podcast. You know, like I just listened. Where did I listen to this before? And I'm like, oh my goodness, in Dave's podcast.
I love it.
So and there was one that I was actually like, okay, hold on, because he was saying that if you are not monetized, you are not out there. He didn't say it with those words, but
Yeah.
you are not an official podcast. And I'm like,
Wow. Wow.
no, that's not true, because
Wow.
you can have a bunch of listeners, and that's not your, what's her name? I don't know if you listen to Jasmine Star.
Yeah.
She's a
Yep.
big podcaster, right? She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't monetize. She doesn't announce anything on her show, and she gives so much knowledge away. I
Yeah.
love
She's
her.
amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, marketing and strategies on how to do social media. I've learned so much from her, and this is an interesting thing because I'm not working with her, even though she doesn't know it. You know, she's part of my network. Why? Because
Right.
I have like 5 or 6 podcasts on my playlist that they
Nice.
come to me every week, and I'm learning from her. And, I digest the information. And then whenever somebody asks me, I'm like, oh, I remember Jasmine Star talked about it. Let me share it with you. So
Smart.
that's how it starts growing, and you're passing on the information. And also, like, I think, what good does it do to keep it for you
Right.
if you don't share it? So, those little things, I think, you said it. You had a networking event, and so only one person showed up, and that person said, like, "Oh, okay, well, we're gonna postpone it," and you said, "No, we're gonna talk. You have me. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this." And it's using those skills, because there might be people that say, like, "Yeah, you know what? It's only one person, so let's our schedule." Right?
Yeah.
And that's where you lose the value of connecting, because like you said at the beginning, we're going to learn from each other. It's not that, okay, I'm going to coach you through the things that you don't know. And I don't know, I could learn something from you too. So.
Yeah. And I did an episode a little while ago where I talked about what was our minimum number of listeners that we would be happy with. Because we hear the opposite in podcasting, where you have to shoot for the stars and get those million downloads. And that's when you're a success. And when you're monetized, you're a success. Right.
Right.
And that's what we hear a lot of in podcasting. I want to go the other way and ask the other side of the question. What is the minimum number of listeners that you would show up for? Back to my example about networking and holding that meetup, and that only one person showed up out of the 6 that signed up. It happens. 5 people didn't show, 1 did. Is 1 enough for me to spend an hour one-on-one with a person? Yes, for me.
Absolutely.
And that's a sobering number to think about. Like, all the time and effort we put into podcasting and creating our show, and we put a lot of effort into it. We want everyone to listen. Obviously, we want to grow, but if one person showed up, would you be disappointed? And there's people that are experts that would say that's a complete fail. And I challenge that, because that one person could have impact far and beyond what we could ever imagine. And while we're recording this today, I'm also recording a little mini series on my How to Podcast series. I like to use the word series a lot. And it's called the Appleseed series. And in the Appleseed series, what I'm talking about is a quote that I heard many years ago, that you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed.
Love it.
And that's the power of impact, right? We can count the number of listeners, but do you really know how far-reaching your impact is as your podcast maybe changes one person's life? They talk about it with their partner. That changes their marriage, which changes their parenting, which changes their children's lives, which changes their future parenting and relationships, all from one episode where you got on and spent time talking to one person and sharing your podcast with that one person. You can't measure that. There's no way to measure that. Just like you talk about Jasmine Starr, and you took her content and gave it to someone else. There's no way for her to measure that return on investment. There's no way, because you as a listener are sharing it outside of her community to someone else and saying, this really gave me value. Listen to this episode. So it's that Appleseed moment that we can't measure everything. So if you're really concerned about numbers and you're disappointed with 5 listens on your last episode, those 5 people could represent thousands of people. Just keep that in mind when you come to the microphone.
That's true. That's true. And it's empowering also, because as a podcaster, because sometimes, Dave, I don't know if it happens to you, but I release my shows on Tuesday, and exactly today, it's not there yet because I got behind and things happen, and I'm like, why am I going to put all this, the recording, the editing, the thumbnail, the promoting, if only one person's listening. It's stopping for you, like, I'll do it tomorrow, and you keep procrastinating. But the more you do it, the more you are conscious about that. I love the Appleseed analogy, because then you're like, okay, that one person, it's waiting, or it's looking like, oh, it's Tuesday, I didn't get my podcast. Where are they? And also the thing that it just dawns to me as you're sharing that, it's the in my case, the basic stories that I say, that I'm like, oh, this only happens to me? Like, no, there might be somebody else that needs to get this information or that can relate to this. And it took me forever to find my niche, if that's, and I was like, I wanted to talk about all things, and I was doing children's ministries, but, I was like, there's tons of podcasts on children's ministry, but guess what? Nobody talks about children's ministry like I do.
Right.
And hasn't gone through my experiences like I do. And, again, now I'm doing my basic stories. And I don't talk a lot about children's ministry anymore because I don't work at a church anymore. So the information changes a little bit, but the purpose is the same, to impact someone. Because I also think whoever takes the time to listen and put us in their head, it's a gift. Like, you can't just sit down there and say like, oh, I don't have my bullet points or my script. I'm just going to talk. You're robbing people from the time that they are using to, to listen to you. So And so, yeah, I think that's important.
And when we talk about all the other podcasts that talk about topics that we talk about, and we're thinking, how can my podcast be unique when there's so many other shows that talk about what I want to talk about? But there's only one, Anna Zugheri, who has your story, your history, who sees the world the way you see it, have met the people you've met, read the books you've read, lived the life you've lived. There is no one else who could do your podcast.
That's
Someone
right.
else could talk about your topic,
Mm-hmm.
but the people that come to your show every week, even if it's only one, they're coming for you
Right.
because they have a connection with you as the host. And that's why they show up. I talked to a podcaster today before we chatted. She has a podcast that goes out every Wednesday. And she has a gardener, landscaper, who
Mhm.
listens to her podcast every week on a certain day and goes to a certain property to work because it takes them that long to do the work at that property
Mhm.
because they listen to the podcast at the same time. So that person is waiting for their episode and they schedule their week around that episode
right.
release
Wow.
every week. That's
Mhm.
one person,
Mm-hmm.
one example. So that keeps that podcaster motivated to release every week on the same time because that person is waiting to do that job, to listen to your show at that point in time. And they built their whole week around you.
Now,
Now, if you
so
only had one
powerful.
listener, would you still do the episode? Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know
Yeah.
that that person is waiting for it.
Right.
And that's like, what a connection with an audience.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that through radio. You're not going to get that through social media, where somebody will change their whole week around your content.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That's a beautiful moment. I love that in
It is.
podcasting.
It is. Yes. And, well, this is going to bring me back to networking because what we're talking about, if I hadn't talked to you today, and I just confess that I don't have my show ready yet, I plan to release it sometime before 7:00 tonight, but you are helping me to get motivated again and do this thing. So the networking part, I think that it's so important for those moments that we need to be reminded, hey, there's someone that is waiting for your show on Wednesday, and that their work revolves around your podcast, or it's important. So get going. And like the networking part is like, hey, Dave, I need you to inflate my balloon a little bit because it's losing gas.
Yes. See? And that's why we
Yeah.
do this. I love it. So, Anna, talk to a new podcaster who doesn't know where to start with networking. They don't know even how to do this. They've never done this. It's not in their skill set. They don't do it in their 9-to-5 job. They've never been good at networking. I want you to be the teacher here based on the great episodes you have on your podcast, but your insight on networking for a new podcaster. I'm going to get out of the way. You talk to them directly.
Okay.
What would you say to a new podcaster listening about the power of networking and how do we even do this?
Yeah. Well, so there's two things that I feel are super important when you think about networking, and it's think about you and the other person. But it starts with you. Like you need to first of all identify who you are, right? Because there's people out there that are I'm an extrovert. And what do you do when you're an introvert? And it's not that easy to network. My mom used to say that I would talk to a tree because, that's the way I am. I'm not afraid of going and introducing myself and meeting people and this kind of stuff. But I have a daughter that is very introvert. Don't you dare to just bring her into a bunch of people and make her introduce herself because it's panic attack. So that's the number one thing. So a lot of people that do podcasts, it's because of the sound, right? Like they don't want to be seen, but they want to be heard. I think everybody wants to be heard. So for them, the networking part is like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to be seen. I just want to be heard. So my first advice is start where you are. Where do you feel like you don't have to go into big conferences and do big groups, or just if you know one podcaster fella, just hold on to that person, and that person will connect you with other ones, or like people that want to do interviews, right? They could be very good at interviewing, but again, that being an introvert, how do I get guests? Well, you need a network. You need to know people. And also, here is a word of caution, because it's just like how Dave and I met, but there's a lot of Facebook groups out there, of beginners podcasting, or I'm part of 3 or 4, like Christian podcasters and several. And there's people that say like, hey, I need guests, and they put for my show, and then people start replying, oh, I would love to be your guest. And I'm like, whoa, you don't even tell me what your podcast is about, and you're starting. You're a new podcaster, and you think that you need to be in every show and everything to get yours out there, right? So just please be very careful. Do not do that, okay? Because as a guest, they need to screen you. Dave screened me before he invited me to his show, and vice versa, right? Because at the same time, I've been in podcasts where they are starting, and I'm like, oh, well, I've been there. Let me help you. But then, after I left, I was like, oh man, I don't think I should have done that, because the sound was awful. The video was blurry, all these things, and your name is out there now. So that's kind of like a parenthesis on the part of how to start, and if you're starting. But that's a good thing that I would like to share with you. If you're starting a podcast, don't do that. Do not do that.
Very wise words. I like that.
Yeah. So, another thing is, I talked to you about knowing yourself. Where are you? Don't try to run if you're just walking. Or some people start really like, like with all of it. They don't start because they're waiting to record 5 episodes and then release it. Right. And I think that's, in my eyes, I don't see that being wise, because it kind of stops you from just going. And I think, I relate everything to Jesus, but, Peter is stepping out of the boat and stepping on water. Like, no, I'm not even going to think. I'm going to step on the water and do this, right? Because I love it. I want it. So I think that, that power that gives you that what do you call it, stamina or excitement of starting your podcast, just do it. And the first 3 are not gonna come out perfect. You're gonna be learning as you go, but don't just say like, I'm not gonna start until I have all these things, or until I build my network and see where I connect and things like that. So don't do that. Yeah. And the things that I will empower you to do is that connect with one person. You can connect with, I'm putting Dave here on the line. You can connect with me. And there's people out there that will walk with you through your starting. And then, now I know Dave, and Dave knows other podcasters, and maybe he knows my content is based on Christianity, and he might connect me with other podcasters that I could have as guest on my podcast, or vice versa. So now there is one link that's connecting, right? So I think that it's very, very important that you start networking at your own pace when you start.
Great. Great, great, great. And I love everything that you said. And I agree with it 100% because going back to your episodes on your podcast, you really hone in on networking and why it's so important. And I'd love for people to go check out your podcast. We're going to have links, obviously, in the podcast show notes, but I would love for people to go over there and subscribe and follow because you bring so much value in your podcast and it comes from a great place as well. You're not there to sell us something. You're there to share. And, even though you say it's basic, I think your content is not basic. You have such great quality to what you do. So it's exciting. It's exciting. So what are some of the things that you're kind of learning about yourself as a podcaster, where you look back to the early episodes and you look at how you're doing podcasting now? How are you a different person because you have a podcast?
Oh man, Dave, that's ooh. So here comes a minute of vulnerability.
Okay.
I actually, I started the podcast back in, I think, 2020. And again, I thought I was doing great and I had a great momentum. I had great stories and all those things. I think I got to episode 16 or 20, and then things started happening around my personal life. And I was in a lot of distress, a lot of things, really ugly things happened. So long story short, I started taking therapy. And through digging and starting to learn about myself, I learned that my self-esteem was not very good or where it should be, in a healthy way. And so podcasting was something that I shouldn't be doing that. I'm not, no, I shouldn't be doing that because I don't have a great voice, or people may think that I am 6 foot tall and I'm 4'11". Things like that, or like English is not my first language and I don't pronounce words correctly, and all of these things. It's nastiness. But friends, also let me tell you that when you are after something good, the enemy is going to come and try to take you down. With lies, and he comes to steal your joy and all of the things. So thankfully, my insurance covers therapy. Very expensive, but I have a great therapist, and coming back to my podcast again and say, empowering me, it's done a lot for my mental health. It's been helping me to be more confident, to really, the first goal that I said when I started my podcast is to leave a legacy, some things that I want my grandchildren to learn. Like, I wish I could have known more things about my grandmother, her lifestyle and things. So I hope this could be as a what do you call that? A testimony and history of where my future grandchildren came from. My grandma was so basic and I'm a little extra.
See.
So yeah, I think podcast has helped me a lot into being more confident and make my daughters proud of me and
I'm sure they
encourage
are.
me.
I'm sure they are so proud.
Thank you. Yes, my husband too. He's very empowering, and he's like, you got to do this, and he's very also. Oh my goodness, he's been so supportive and forgiven for all the dinners that haven't been cooked because I'm recording. Or editing, and last night he washed the dishes.
No, we just recorded that.
Right?
We have proof now. We have proof.
Yeah. So I just came and cooked dinner, but I had a recording, so I left all the dishes there. And when I came out, everything was clean. I was like, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. Of course, it's important to have a support your network, right? That
There
it's
you
right
go.
behind you.
You did it again.
Yeah, your personal network, because I would definitely not be able to do this without them.
Anna, I wanted to talk networking today, and you definitely have hit so many amazing points. And I hope that people listening to this can build their network now. And if they want to network with you, see how I'm doing this? If they
Yeah.
want to network with you, Anna, and get more information about your podcast, where do we go? What do we do?
You can totally network with me. I love it. And I also have a few tips on how to network in person. Like I didn't know this, but basic stuff like, do you know what side to put your sticker? Usually when you go to places and they give you a sticker to put your name on. So everybody, do you
Yeah.
know where to put your sticker on?
I would know. No.
Yeah. So it goes on the left side, because when you meet somebody and you shake their hand, with the right
All
hand,
right.
you cover your name and they can't see your name. So I'm like, wait, what? That is so basic. And I never
So
paid
basic.
attention to those little things, right?
So basic. Yeah.
So yeah, I have a bunch of tips like that. So I would love to network with you. You can go to www.faith52.com and you can find So Basic with a little extra on Spotify, Apple, all the iHeartRadio, the most popular ones. And my email is on Faith52. I'm also on Facebook, and you can just Google my name and I should be, show up for you. That's kind of embarrassing, but yeah, I'm out there on the internet.
And the easiest thing to do if you want a lot more Anna in your life is you hit that little follow button on our podcast. Yes. And every time a new episode comes out, it goes straight to your device. You never have to go searching for us ever again. You just hit follow, subscribe, whatever it says on your app. And you never, ever have to worry about missing an episode. It'll be there waiting for you every time. So I'm excited. Tell us what the episode is coming out. The next one that's coming soon. What's that one about, Anna?
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's going to be so good, guys, because I'm talking to a $1 million real estate agent. Like she does real estate agent with $1 million houses, and she's going to talk to us about her success and why she's so successful. Like how does she treat her clients that they coming back, and she got bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's we're gonna add that, and then just you gotta listen for the basic story.
I love it. Anna, would you please tell me and make me happy to tell me that you will come back in the future and reconnect with us and give us an update on your podcast? Would you do that?
Absolutely. Anytime, Dave. And also, I'm just going to throw it out here, Dave, if you want to come to So Basic, I'll be the basic and you'll be the extra.
I'll bring my own balloon and I'll be ready to be on your podcast.
Yes, awesome. I will love it. Love it, love it.
All right, everyone. All the information for Anna Zugheri's podcast, So Basic with a little extra. Again, I think there's a lot more than just basics here. You're going to learn a lot of great stuff on Anna's show. All the information's in the show notes, and I would love for you to go support Anna as part of the How to Podcast family now as a guest co-host. And go give her some love and some support, and just let her know that you heard her on the podcast. And I think she'd love to hear from you, and she'd love to network with you as a listener to the show. So if you need any help with your podcast, Anna is there. She has her hand raised. She's ready to go to help you. So Anna, thank you so much for making time to be on the podcast as a guest co-host. Again, I'd love to have you back. So let's work on that, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, friends, and God bless.